Speaking of drama, there was an interesting article by Timothy Leward. We love Tim. We stand for Tim from Wargaming.com. So I love Wargaming.com. They're a great website. They come out with some really fantastic articles, general news updates, but also some really good thought pieces. And I think this might be an interesting one. I have merely looked at the headline, so I thought we could look at it together. Years of expansion to the setting and the undeniable allure of high-tech ultraviolence have diluted 40K's satirical content into oblivion. A very powerful statement indeed.
Stop right there!
In November 2021, when the Black Lives Matter movement was particularly visible in global news, Games Workshop released a blog stating that Warhammer 40k is a satire. According to GW, while the Imperial Man is the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable, to quote the foreword to Rogue Trader, it is presented with humour, irony, and exaggeration to reveal its vices and flaws to scorn, derision, and ridicule. Which is obviously something that Games Workshop have always, lent on. But then you get people on Twitter that act like it isn't satire. And then whenever you bring up that post, they quote it's a rogue intern who posted the article and left it up for 4 years or 3 years or whatever. So they always claim, people who are not right, they are right, but just the alt type. They usually say that the game isn't satire, fascism's great. And it was a rogue intern that posted it at the beginning. But also what's quite funny is that Games Workshop say it's satire. They allude to it being satire. It used to be very, very satire, and now it's not so much. And then they, post the heroes of the Imperium, the fascists. Gulliman, the ultimate leader of the fascists, as an angel, which is also, very funny. This statement from GW is political. It says, we believe in and support a community united by shared values of mutual kindness and respect. We will never accept nor condone any form of prejudice, hatred, or abuse in our company or in the Warhammer hobby. Wargamer absolutely agrees with that sentiment. I also agree. But claiming that the Imperium Man is presented satirically simply fails to acknowledge the reality of modern Warhammer 40k, and from that disconnect, Discord grows. Because, I think the trailer for 10th edition had Gulliman basically accepting that the idea of the Imperium was failing. And the whole speech was about from the outside rather than a public service announcement, which a lot of the monologues in trailers and stuff like that are. The trailer from the 10th edition launch was Gulliman saying, this is all this is all gone to pot. What do we do, Dad? It's not super obvious that might be the intention of it, which obviously makes it more difficult. That isn't every time Games Workshop puts something out about Space Marines or whatever. It was kind of one time, and then everything else doesn't come across as satirical very often. First edition of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader was written in 1987 largely by Rick Priestley, an up-and-coming young game designer who had cut his teeth co-writing the original Warhammer fantasy battles. It was a hodgepodge of ideas from many sources: Frank Herbert's Dune, 2000 AD comic strips like Judge Dredd and Nemesis the Warlock, Michael Moorcock's fantasy and sci-fi, Brilliant Josie's Farmers, The World of Tears, Brian Ansell's Laserburn Wargame. The Rogue Trader era of 40k was certainly political, but it wasn't focused. There are throwaway gags referencing pop culture like Inquisitor Obi-Wan, Sherlock, Colosso, and niche references to British culture like a dig the cultureless planet Birmingham, which is named after a rather unfairly maligned UK town. Birmingham is trash, to be fair. It's hard to back there are no good guys in 40k when they keep putting Ultramarines front and center against the forces of chaos. Yeah, that's the thing. You can say it's satire, but you have to keep making it satire. You can't just say it and then do something opposite. There are no good guys in 40k, the Imperium especially. Now read these books full of cool guys to the Imperium. Also true. Whilst it is based on satire, and sometimes they've come out with satire, not everything is explicitly satire. It is quite the opposite. If you read it as, oh, this is all propaganda because it's a satirical fascist state, then it is all satire, but also it's not quite obvious. If I think while I'm reading this is satire, it's satire. Since Rogue Trader was published, Warhammer 40k has been developed and expanded with a ridiculous quantity of content. It isn't one single thing anymore. It's a complex of Warhammer 40k books, codexes, miniatures, Warhammer Plus animations, tie-in, games, and on PC and console, even marketing materials. There's more of it than any one person can engage with, and the focus has been split even further. To call it all satire undersells how diverse, tangled, and contradictory it is. If your first encounter with Warhammer 40k is seeing a cardboard marketing study of a Primaris Space Marine, it's not going to be a satirical experience. So that's the thing. That's what I mean. If you read it all as you go, it is all satire, it would come across as satire. However, on the face of it, it isn't satire. For satire to effectively criticize something, it needs to be focused. The target must be clear, and relentless energy must be applied to undermine it. Satire doesn't have to be funny, but comedy does make a great vehicle for it because it prioritizes immediacy, impact, and clarity, and formulating a message that can be reliably make it through to an audience of possibly disinterested consumers. Anyone claiming this is all true for 140k today faces a serious uphill struggle, and that's what I'm trying to say. If you read it as satire, it will come across as satire, but if you don't realize it's satire, it won't come across. It'll come across as good guy saves the day. Good guy fascism saves the day. Don't quote that. Warhammer 40k has always been cool. It's a game and a setting with a blank space to which players will add their own narratives. It's full of ideas and characters that, when considered on their own terms as something to play with in a universe without consequences, are simply awesome, even if they are objectively appalling when we apply contextual knowledge from the outside world. The very first artwork of Space Marines shows them to be snarling, scarcely human, bionically enhanced brutes, but they've always looked dope. John Blanche's illustration of Imperial Guard commissars were directly inspired by the barbaric real-world military practice of executing soldiers for failure to follow orders, but he still gave them the sickest drip you've ever seen. They're so cool because they have cool armor. He kind of looks sick though. It's not over the top enough to be seen as satire. People still don't realize Robocop and Starship Troopers are satire. That's the thing. Helldivers 2 is heavily inspired by Starship Troopers. Helldivers 2 is hyper satirical.
Well, sweet liberty.
And they're quite obvious with it a lot of the time. But people still miss the point. For Super Earth, for liberty! And it's like, Super Earth's really bad. The whole reason that you're fighting the aliens and the robots is because Super Earth kind of made them. You're extracting 710 liquid. Because the Tyranids, the knockoff Tyranids, are making oil. And you're just stealing the oil from them. But they're like, God, these Tyranids are trying to hack this factory. When in fact, you're actually pulping the Tyranids down into oil to use as fuel for Super Earth. It's highly satirical, but people don't notice that. That sounds dangerously undemocratic. What do you mean? They're not making oil, they're making 710. That's the thing. That's the point. See, it's funny, but also people take it seriously. It's a great example of a new satirical background that people are taking seriously. Warhammer 40k lore is developed in directions that directly undermine its ability to criticize the real-world inspirations of the Imperium. While Rogue Trader presented an Imperium that's arguably as atrocious as the forces that opposed it, the threats it faces have since escalated wildly, weakening the setting's satirical base by giving the Imperium more convincing excuses to be awful. The Drakari aren't just Eldar raiders, they're Hellraiser-style torture vampires. The Tyranids aren't just goofy-looking buds, they're galaxy-spanning extinction event. Chaos Space Marines aren't just rebels, they're malevolent, murderous cultists in a league with metaphysical powers that want to torture every human soul for eternity. In that ignoble company, the Imperium Man is clearly the lesser evil. Because obviously it used to be like, they're really bad, but these are kind of bad. And then they've flipped on its head where everything is like crazy bad. So you need the Imperium to look after you. I think that's the kind of like the vibe it's getting, right? The irony and exaggeration remain, but they're now the background to a battle for survival, told from the point of view of usually relatable, sympathetic, and enjoyable Imperial characters. Satirical motives no longer pointed at a satirical target. While the Imperium is clearly corrupt, inefficient, and ruinous to its citizens, the reality of its situation has changed to a critique into a question. Are these acceptable prices for continued survival? Are these inevitable consequences of continued survival? Great fodder for sci-fi debates, but an effective satire. Because again, that's the thing. We're really good, stay with us, but everything else is arguably better. And they're just kind of like mocking it, but they're not mocking it. They portray the Space Marines as the last hope for humanity. But then they put unspeakable horrors against them. So they start to look like the last hope for humanity. When demons that come out of literally hell come and fight them and they try and stop them. That isn't satirical anymore. It's just the opposite. If they started writing a lot more from other perspectives and made the Marines like look horrible, then they would come across as more satirical. The way they portray stuff is doing the opposite of what they want. To make it clear, anyone who thinks the politics of the Imperium of Man are a model to work from is wrong, but the primary reason for their wrongness isn't because 40k is a satirical critique of their ideology, it's because Warhammer 40k is fiction. Using Warhammer 40k to support real-world beliefs is like painting a door onto a brick wall and then trying to open it because you saw it in a cartoon. Every text is multi-layered, seeking to entertain and bring the author's personal perspective to life, but also carrying a certain baggage of genre expectation, including pulp, adventure, procedural war dramas, horror, mystery, comedy, and much more. Which of the many possible readings we take away depends on what we bring to the work as readers, and there isn't a correct hierarchy of interpretation. And that's the thing, like, because there's so many people involved, and because it's devolved from being super satire to horror and action, that the more people that write for it, the less focused it's going to be. because it's so much less focused, the satire nature of it is lost, because ultimately, when it was quite obviously satire, it was written by like 2 people. Games Workshop becoming a corporate powerhouse beholden to their investment bank shareholders means you'll never get a fair view of anything. You'll get what makes them the most money. Yeah, true. When it's an independent little company doing it, they were fine, but now they're a big shareholder company. They can't make big companies sound bad, because they are one. Wargaming still welcomes GW's statement that real-world hate groups and adherents of the historical ideologies better left in the past. Yeah, true. Who seek to claim intellectual property for their own enjoyment and to co-opt them for their own agendas aren't welcome in the hobby. They bring the mood down, to put things mildly.
Beast.
But simplifying the complex media beast down to a single genre it only vestigially resembles doesn't help us to accurately understand it or to unpick and address the different motivations that bring the people to the hobby. If we want to create and sustain a positive and inclusive culture in the hobby, we need to start with a frank assessment of what's actually being offered up by Warhammer 40k as it is today, however uncomfortable to our sensibilities the answer may be. Great article, and a great closer as well. That's the thing. We think it's satire, but Games Workshop doesn't always portray it as satire, and they are doing a worse and worse job of it. And the fact that that's the case, you can't just go, well, it is satire, because ultimately, it is built upon satire, but it has evolved completely in the past 40 years. Arguably, it is still satire, and you can read it as satire, but it's not very obvious that it is satire unless someone goes, just say no, it's all a joke. Because, as I said, if you're going to say satire, it's like, well, you have to be part of the Imperium because they're really bad. Everything else is really bad, and everything else isn't really bad. They're lying to you. That's satire. Much like Helldivers 2, you know? You're attacking the Terminids because they keep trying to invade when they're just trying to exist and you created them and now you're using them for oil. That's satire. Whereas killing the Tyranids because they're bio-harvesting every planet in sight and killing civilians, that's not satire anymore. That is just heroes being heroes, you know? Go and kill the baddie. I think using Helldivers 2 as like a reference now is quite an interesting one for the fact that Games Workshop have lost their satire. Whilst they are still trying to be satire, because they are so widespread now, there are so many different voices involved with producing the works of Warhammer, it's very different to what it once was.